Hello, everybody. Here I am with another lesson on life. Sounds very general, but specifically here, I'll be talking about the psychology of tyranny. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist, and I'm very interested in freedom, which is the opposite of tyranny, which takes your power and your control away. But what I want to talk about is something that not so much the tyranny of the state taking over and going into a Venezuela or a Cuba. The dynamics are the same, but I'm talking more about intellectual freedom and what I call the tyranny of intellectual suppression. And there's certain dynamics in psychology that actually lead to it, and without you knowing it, you become what Lenin and Stalin used to call useful idiots, people that are used in order to get you to the outcome. The end justifies the means. So tyranny doesn't start by saying we're going to control you and we're going to take over your thinking and you're going to do what I tell. It doesn't work that way because nobody would buy it. But what they do, and they're not smart enough to know psychology, but they're devious enough to use some psychological principles without them even knowing that they're psychological principles to manipulate you. And the first thing that happens when you try to open this up and you try to expose it is that you are given a label of a conspiracy theorist or a racist or some of the names that are put out without any kind of logical thinking or without any kind of discourse. So, knowing that, here's how I think it works. First, you have to have a cause. You have to have something that's worthwhile. For example, racism or gender identity problems or economics. You have to find something that appeals to people, and then that cause becomes the what appears to be the issue. Who would object to having racial equality? Who would object to women being having the same equitable kinds of opportunities as men? Nobody would. I mean, no rational, intelligent people would do that. So you find a cause that has value, that has humanistic value, and then you distort it and you bastardize it in order to get you to buy into what they're wanting. And what they're wanting is not necessarily that. They have another cause, which is power. And the difference between power and control is that you can give up your control, but never your power. Control is that if you know that somebody knows more than you, let's say you go to a financial advisor or an accountant or a doctor, and they know more than you in an area, so you give them control to make decisions for you. Power is when that decision making is taken away from you and no longer have an opportunity to have decisions. That's power. You never give up your power to anyone, no matter what. You can give up control by choice, but it's an intelligent, cogent decision that you make. But what happens is that with the tyranny of intellect or any kind of tyranny, they gradually, first you give them control and then they take your power away, and then there's nothing you can do about it. So they're not going to put you in jail, but what they're going to do is they're going to ostracize you and put you into a place where you be categorized by something that's very negative and also misconstrued. Like, for example, that you're either a conspiracy theorist or a racist or a misogynist or anything else, any other name that has a negative cultural connotation. The other thing about power and about tyranny is that you are put in a position where you're not able to dialogue, discourse, or dissent. Because if you do, then you're put into that place that I talked about, which is you are a bad person. There's no dialoguing. There's no, and in political correctness, that's exactly what happens. If you happen to disagree with someone who fits into that icon that I call the victim icon, whether it's a woman or whether it's a gay or whether it's Hispanic or whatever, you can't argue. That's it. It's the icon. And if you argue, then they have the names for you, and you're a misogynist or you're a racist or a white supremacist, whatever. So the way that it works is that first you give them control because it's a good cause. Racism or anti-gay. Those are good causes. That you want to protect people for their sexual preference. You want to protect people for their gender. You want to protect people for their socioeconomics. So you give up your control, and then gradually it's set up in a way where you've also given away your power. So the dynamics are first to entice you with a good cause, to for you to give them permission to control what they're doing, and then to take the power away by punishing you when you don't agree with the kinds of things that they're wanting to sell. And that's usually what happens with totalitarian governments. At first, they let the press do their work, they let their intellectuals do their work, and the intellectuals are in agreement at first. It happened in Cuba, it happened at Venezuela, everywhere. And then what they do is they take your power away, they take the media away, which are the social idiots, and they set the text away, which are the social idiots, and then the government controls. That's for at the national level. That's at the level of nationhood. But the same thing happens with intellect. At universities, talk to a lot of students, and they have you can't have any dissent. You have to agree with the professor says, and if you don't agree, especially if it's about issues on the icons, the victim icons, forget it. There's no discourse, and you will be failed or you'll get a bad grade. It happens all the time, because a lot of these professors are people that have never made it in the business world, and they're out there in their ivory towers, and they're pontificating things that they don't know anything about. They talk about economics and they never run a business. They talk about psychology and they've never seen a patient. And they talk about economics and again, same thing. For example, Karl Marx was a failed individual. He got a PhD, he couldn't get a job. He wanted to, and this is 19th century thinking, but some people think that it's still good. So Karl Marx couldn't get a job, and the Marxism is to overthrow capitalism. So then he finds Engels, and Engels was the son of an industrialist, someone who was a capitalist. And then Engels begins to support Karl Marx and support his family, his wife, his children, and then they write together. It would have been nice if Engels hadn't helped him, because then Marx would have had to have gotten a job and there would be no manifesto, and it would have saved about 100 million lives of the communist experiment. That's at the level of the state. But I'm talking more about at the level of the everyday life, of the way that they take your selfhood away, because you can no longer think for yourself. You have to have groupthink. And you will find that there's a relativism. When you try to argue the point, they'll go somewhere else. And if you say, look, I can disagree with someone who is of a different race or a different sexual preference, independent of anything else. We can disagree about aesthetics. We can disagree about ethics, whatever. No, not acceptable, because you are a racist if you are talking to another race and coming up with an issue that has nothing to do with race or even race. You talk about it and you discourse and you rationally come to agreements, and that's what freedom is all about. But with the intellectual tyranny, you can't have freedom of speech. Of course, you can speak, but you will be punished with whatever label they give you. So in psychology, we know pretty much that freedom equals options. The more options you have, the more your sense of freedom. When your options are taken away from you, then you go into a state of loss of freedom. So if you begin to feel that you're dealing with issues that don't allow you to have the options to do what you want to do, of course, if something that's legal and reasonable, then you're being manipulated into the loss of freedom by taking your options away. And one of the beauties of an open market, a free market, is it has a lot of flaws. But one of the freedom is, if you don't like this, you go somewhere else. You don't like the way this person treats you, you go to another business. But in a centralized government, you don't. In Cuba, for example, I've been to Cuba many times and doing humanistic exchange of academia. And over there, you go to school and you don't study psychology. You study Marxist psychology. You don't study philosophy. You study Marxist philosophy. So everything is politicized, and that's another thing about going into the intellectual freedom. Everything is politicized. The psychology, the philosophy, the medicine, politics, everything is politicized and put into that model that if you don't agree with us, it's not that you have an opinion, it's that there's something wrong with you and you need to clean it up because I have a monopoly on truth. So that is how that happens. The psychology of tyranny is based on psychological principles of control, and they're very good at controlling. So there's a difference now, you see, between power and control and freedom and lack of freedom based on the options that you have. So I'll be talking more about this, and this has nothing to do with politics. It's not whether you're liberal or conservative. It has to do with logic. It has to do with selfhood, the psychology of freedom, the psychology of wellness. And when you have that taken away from you, then you begin to not only deteriorate in the sense of emotions, but it affects your psychoneuroimmunology, affects your immune system, your nervous system, your endocrine system. And that's why people who live in totalitarian countries uh, are not healthy, and the lifespan goes down because of that. So we were made, and we have evolved from being just the survival of the species and the propagation of the species into finding meaning. So the new revolution is not the information revolution. The new revolution is the revolution of meaning and introspection and finding out what in the hell are you doing here and what do you do? What kind of service do you want to give to society and to yourself? What Aristotle called eudaimonia, which is pleasure with service, purpose, and meaning. So one of the talks I'm going to talk about eudaimonia and actually how good it is for the immune system. So again, remember, rebel against any tyranny, whether it's at the state level or at the intellectual level on the individual. So enjoy, and I will talk to you soon, and we'll continue these lessons, hopefully. And if you have any comments, please, on my YouTube, write the comments, and also subscribe so you can be notified when these YouTube lessons, mini lessons come up. All right, so enjoy, have a great day, and don't give up your power to anyone, and only your control to people that will support and respect your control. If not, don't give it. It's yours. Enjoy.